Hello and welcome to the Holistic Psychiatrist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alice Lee, the Holistic Psychiatrist practicing in Lehi, Utah. Today, I'm going to be creating a spontaneous, kind of free-flowing conversation with Jack Rome, who's joining me to create this podcast today. And Jack has been working with me for many years. He's a digital media artist, a music producer, writer, and editor, and his website is jackintheway.net. My website is holisticpsychiatrist.com, and you can find all my information on that website. So today I thought what we would do is have a conversation about what intentions do and how they work. And Jack is going to be, discussing this topic, this very important topic that is central to the work that I do in energy medicine. So the reason why this kind of podcast is especially relevant for me at this time is that I'm writing a book. And right now, this book reflects some of the stories or tales and experience that I've had as a holistic psychiatrist. And the book uses stories to help me illustrate some very important principles or very important concepts or experiences that I, as a holistic psychiatrist, have kind of a unique window towards experiencing and knowing. So today the chapter, one of the chapters has to do with tales that I share about intentions and how I've used it in funny ways in my life and practical ways in my life. So that's why we picked this topic. And what Jack and I want to do is do a series of different topics, and they will follow along some of the chapters that I have been writing towards creating this book. And I hope that you'll enjoy that process as well. All right, Jack, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. This is great. I mean, we talked about how this is going to feel nice and fresh and kind of a new way of doing things. And I think as far as the listener is concerned, I hope that you kind of get a sense of like we're kind of going with a bouncier way of talking here, which I think will actually lend itself to a lot of the topics we talk about, because so many of these topics are connected in ways that don't necessarily lend themselves to such a rigid, strict structure. A lot of the time it's a lot better when we can keep things fluid. So I'm really excited to do that. And as we've talked about before, I have more experience with the sort of fluid way of doing things. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a bit of a experiment for us, and certainly a little bit different because normally when we do our podcasts, we already know some of the questions that we're going to be exploring. And we're trying to kind of go with the outline. But today we don't have an outline. So it's going to be, we're going by kind of intuition, I guess, to see where it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So Jack, take it away.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and start, and you can help guide the interview, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing that I have in mind when you were talking in your intro about sort of just the topic and your relation to it and how it's a vital piece of your work. I mean, there's no getting around that. It is. And I imagine the person listening knows that as well based on listening to your other podcasts. And we've talked about intention as well before, but I feel like we haven't sort of come at it in this way where we say, how does intention work and what works about it and what doesn't work about it? Yeah. And I think the first thing that I want to hear from you, and then I can offer my own thoughts too, is when it comes to your own personal experience of intention and the power of intention and whatever other word people want to use, but intention is a really good one. How did you come to learn from your own firsthand experience that intention works and how it works? Because I feel like, at least from my experience, in terms of intention or like using my imagination in order to support my intention or the other way around, I discovered it when it had been so messy. Like I didn't, because it's working whether we're conscious of it or not. And I feel like I discovered it as this incredibly messy experience that I was having, where I would imagine one thing, I didn't want that to happen, and I would intend on another thing, and I didn't want that to happen. And then eventually over time, I sort of streamlined it and got in sync. So could you talk a little bit about like your own firsthand personal experience of that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that there's different ways to think about intention. Um, in ordinary, day-to-day life, we have intentions. Like we wake up in the morning, we say, okay, well, I'm going to blank, whatever it is that you want to do. And that's an intention, and it motivates us to do something that we set an intention towards. But when I think about intention work, like setting intention and creating that, I think of it as a partnership, actually. It's a partnership between me as a mind that can think and decide what I want, and then to create, big things happening or something to shift in a kind of a magical way, I need extra energy. And so I partner with this idea of connecting to this infinite field of potential energy that I call life energy. So that's different from saying, okay, I'm going to go brush my teeth now. I'm going to go have lunch now. That's kind of working with your own energy that you already carry with you. But if you want to create something different, and it requires kind of more energy flowing into the universe that you live in, then you need to kind of think about, well, where can I get that energy? And so the first thing would be that connection. So your question is, how did I begin to do that? I mean, as a child, you think about prayer and how we kind of set positive intentions to get that. But that wasn't really convincing enough for me as a child, because my prayers were literally like 5 seconds long and I had it memorized, and it was like, bless everyone, help me have a good day, those kind of things. But I think the game that came up with me and this universal idea of connection to a divine source, or this idea of perfect energy that's always looking out for my best interest, began when I started playing this game of, finding a parking space. And so I've had many different funny experiences. Some of them I share in my book. But the idea is, when I started working with intention work, it would be like I would be in a parking lot or needing a parking space and I wouldn't see anything around, or I would go into a parking lot and I want to get as close to the entrance as I possibly could. And I would just start to have this kind of conversation between me and divine source. So you can call it universal force or whatever, but it's this being that is intelligent and has my back. And I would just say, this is what I need, and let's see if you can find it, get me one. And that was when I had lots of fun experiences where I would, find something available when nothing was available before, in a very timely way. And this is something that helped me to kind of gain more and more faith that intention works. The other thing is that, of course, the nature of my work is I can share how intentions, connection to this idea of perfect energy, an infinite field of perfect energy, can then shift a person's biology. And I can show the patient through the testing methods, and they would demonstrate this incredible increase in energy when they do that intention work. It's really hard for someone like me, or anyone really, to explain it in words and not be able to demonstrate it and have the other person get it. Like, you literally just have to have proof. And even then, I would say about 1 or 2% of the population that I work with who has a desperate need to access that kind of energy, I can prove it to them and demonstrate it to them. And because of their own skepticism, their own blockages, their own unwillingness to be open, they will still deny it. They would still not get it.
Right.
So it's kind of sad. But
Yeah.
even if you had physical proof, there are certain people who would still reject it because it doesn't fit into their paradigm
Hmm.
in terms of energy.
And maybe dogma too, depending on the
Could
person.
be, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Or it's just too good to be true. They just
Right.
reject it because it can't be true, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow, I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to touch on and just highlight what you said about
Mm-hmm.
partnership. I
Okay.
think that's so powerful, and I really appreciate that personally. I feel like where I'm at right now in my own sort of, I guess you could say, energy work for on myself and for myself. I think I'm in a place where I personally really needed to hear that, and I can imagine there are others who need to hear that because I think sometimes when we think, like you were saying, when we think about intention, even when it's somebody who is cultivating the faith and does believe or does have faith or is open and not trapped by their cynicism or skepticism, even then sometimes it can, what I feel like what can happen is we can fall into sort of a self-created trap where we think that intention only comes from us, like me, Jack, my ego self, my little s
Mm-hmm.
self,
Mm-hmm.
and and what can happen, I think, is we carry the baggage that we previously maybe have had success with in the partnership version of it, and
Mm-hmm.
then we forget about the partnership and think it's all up to me, little me, and
Yeah.
I have to do
Yeah.
everything. I have to lift everything and make it all happen. And I really appreciate what you're saying about partnership because I think that's the difference. That's the difference between imagination or intention that leads to a success in turn, if we want to call success in terms of like accuracy of
Mm-hmm.
manifestation or selection of what you want to happen or to change or healing to happen versus it kind of falling flat because actually I was just trying to go on my own personal self reserve of energy when that's not, it doesn't have to be like that, and it
Mm-hmm.
can't even work like that. I mean, I've tried to do it that way, and it's that's the let me stay up until 4 a.m. to make sure I do every single thing I could possibly do. I mean, that comes from you can just feel how it comes from a place of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, life energy isn't scarce. It's the quite the opposite. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we're open to it being that way. I mean, we could make it scarce if we want to, but then we'd just be closing ourselves off from it. So I wanted to highlight that
Mm-hmm.
aspect of partnership, almost where it's like I may be little me Jack, but I'm swimming inside of an ocean, and in order for the swimming to happen, I need the big ocean, the big water.
Right.
I can't just swim in nothing. There
Mm-hmm.
is something, there is energy that is working with me
Yeah,
there. And
exactly.
yeah. Mhm.
You need to definitely be aware of it, be open to it, and allow that energy to augment and add to
Mm.
the effect that you want.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
the other day, I was thinking about this whole idea of timing of intentions.
Mm.
Like, for example, like I tell people to do the energy breaths, that they find in my website,
Mhm.
like twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. And just the other day, I was like thinking about it and wondering why can't we just do it once in our lives and just have it last your entire life?
Right. Right.
And the insight that came to me was that in a way it's very useful and practical to not have these intentions once you set them have it kind of last forever. Because if you
Mm.
can think about all of the different good and bad intentions that we think of in a given day in our minds, if all of them just last forever and never get like changed until you like remember to change them,
Yeah.
it would be a mess, right? Because
Right.
on bad days, you might intend something horrible.
Right.
And then on good days, you might intend something really grandiose and impossible.
Yeah.
And then, like, all of these kind of conflicting energies are trying to do their work, and nothing's really making any sense.
Yeah.
And I was thinking it's nice to have a day kind of mark the beginning and end of some new intentions, and they have a certain positive effect. So it's like every day you're kind of moving in what your general consistent intentions are.
Mm-hmm.
But like if your intentions are here one day, there another day, you know, they're not going to be like constantly be present to kind of keep you stuck
Yeah.
in, like, for example, let's say as a child, I wanted to be a garbage collector. And then later on, when I'm a teenager, I want to be a ballerina. You know, like those are two very different intentions. And if
Yeah.
every intention you set continues forever,
Right.
how does those two intentions work out for you? It would be like
Right.
really kind of a messy mix,
Right.
right? Like a
Right.
stew that doesn't go
Right.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That messiness, actually, I feel like that's where I was at for a long
Mm.
time before I
Mm-hmm.
kind of had this turnaround moment where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Mm.
like seeing it. Oh, it's like it really can kind of be anything I want. And I've just been
Mm.
imagining all this stuff that
Mm-hmm.
has maybe come true, maybe not come true, depending on how much it was like totally by chance. Like it wasn't conscious.
Mm-hmm.
I would just imagine different scenarios. You know, it's like the movies in our heads that just
Mm-hmm.
play sometimes. I would be so unconscious of them and I would just get wrapped up in them. And I think it created that messiness that you're talking about. And it actually makes me think of another question and sort of maybe
Mm-hmm.
pulling from my own experience of, you know, like for example, and this is actually to bring it around to like some of the stuff that you've put out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy EET, for example, like the
Yeah,
newest EET that you
it
have,
works
and
great. So,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's so
yeah.
and I think, and I actually want to ask you about this because I imagine
Mm-hmm.
others listening use it as
Mm-hmm.
well. That I've found that like for me, repetition is very important, and
Mm-hmm.
I do it every day, sometimes multiple times a day when it feels right.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
kind of like in the way that like I'll stretch a particular muscle, or like I'll
Mm-hmm.
bend down and touch my toes a few times a day when it feels right. It's like that kind of a thing.
Wow.
And I think I've found that the repetition is really valuable. If
Mm-hmm.
however, in repetition, you run
Mm-hmm.
the risk of vain repetition, where I'm not
Mm-hmm.
conscious of what I'm saying, where I
Yeah.
just let it come out, which I'm sure that is still
Mm-hmm.
valuable. But I do think that repetition can be, at least from my experience, can be
Mm-hmm.
so powerful and impactful if you are pairing it with as much conscious intention and sort of like presence as you can. And I wanted to ask you about
Mm-hmm.
that because I feel like when you've talked about it before, you know, you don't say that a person has to do EET every day. I mean, some people don't want to, but the
Mm-hmm.
nice thing is that at a certain point you memorize it. And so like I've
Mm-hmm.
memorized EET and I just have, you know, that gap where you say what your
Mm-hmm.
actual intention is. I just adjust that over time, but I don't like
Mm-hmm.
to adjust it too much. Like if there's
Mm-hmm.
something really pressing that I really need to open myself to,
Mm-hmm.
like I want to get through this day with peace or something, I'll say that, but otherwise I kind of keep it a little bit more general. So and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like keeping it a little more general and not too specific allows what you were saying, allows life energy to augment and participate in the creation so that it's a
Okay.
bit more of a like co-collaborative creative process, which is like
Mm-hmm.
what you were saying with the partnership. And I'm curious to just basically just hear your take on that, about if
Mm-hmm.
people like appreciate the repetition and use it wisely. You know, it's not vain
Mm-hmm.
repetition, but
Okay.
something where I'm really trying to get into the grooves of my brain so that I
Mm-hmm.
really start to accept, like that I just get used to saying things like I you know I want to live a conscious and spacious life, like getting
Mm-hmm.
used to saying that and used to feeling it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, yesterday I was saying how I really appreciate your positivity and, you know, your positive energy. And I wonder if it's because you focus on doing the EET. For those people who don't know what EET is, I think we should just let them know that EET stands for Empower Energy Technique. And it's a very simple kind of spin-off from the bigger technique called the infinite intention technique. So the infinite intention technique has certain kind of ingredients, and EET has all those ingredients, but it's a little bit more like circumscribed and very
Mm-hmm.
easy to do, and all the
Mm-hmm.
words are already selected for you,
Mm-hmm.
except for the one intention that you can insert. So it
Mm-hmm.
has some qualities very similar to EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and also logosynthesis, which also uses like insert a problem into the blank,
Mm-hmm.
or even ask and receive. That's
Mm-hmm.
another technique that also asks us to kind of insert a statement. So with EET, I think repetition is good, because what I found is that when I'm working with patients, I do ask them to do it a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because from my perspective, I'm asking them to do it a couple of times for that problem, because the first times through, they may only intentionally like focus on 50% of what they're saying.
Right.
And then the second time, they're focusing on the rest of what they're saying. And I can usually tell when a technique is working well, because when I'm working with the patient and I'm helping them, what happens is that there are certain signals or signs that energy shifting when I'm kind of connected to their energy, because I'll get teary. Not that I want to cry, but my eyes would start to tear up, and then I would yawn.
Yawning.
And yawning and tearing is usually what happens. Sometimes I cough, and sometimes I might get some really funny tingling sensations. You're like yawning already. Okay. But anyways, so that's what happens. And I am really flattered that you actually do EET every day. Yeah. That is so crazy. All right.
My lyrics.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, that is amazing. In your lyrics. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, I'm totally like flattered by that. But the thing with EET, I try to do it like when I do my quote miracle morning routine.
Right.
Which is a routine that Hal Elrod, who wrote the book The Miracle Morning, recommends. So there's like 6 different things. Among them is visualization, setting intentions, those kind of things. So I just put in that section where we're doing visualization and setting intentions. Sometimes I'll put the EET in there. So my goal for doing the miracle mornings is every morning, wake up and do my miracle morning. Unfortunately, I have this habit of rolling out of bed and starting doing like different chores around the house, different things. Mm-hmm. So I'll find myself, going and doing the laundry, or, like cleaning up this or that. So what I need to do is not even check my cell phone and just do the miracle morning, get that done, and then start my morning. That's how I want to do it. But the repetition, I think for me, I like doing it based on whatever, like when I do my EET in the morning, I like to do it on whatever is bothering me, because I still have so much improvement to go in my life. And there are certain things that might worry me or get under my skin and get in the way of my, my ability to do whatever I want to do. And I think the biggest thing that gets in the way of my writing for this book is worry. Like I worry about this, or I worry about that. So sometimes I'll just use the EET, and I swear it is so effective. Like I would have something that's worrying me and I can't like not stop worrying. And I would do the EET on that. And after I do it a couple of times, I would just be able to let it go and move on with something else. So anyway, that's what I like to do my EET on. And sometimes, like for example, and being an artist, when I'm, like in your situation, and as I'm putting on my creative cap, I might notice getting blocked for some reason, like certain thoughts would come up. And remember our discussion last time where I was like saying that one of the biggest blocks that I find that gets in the way of my writing is comparing myself to people who have already done their writing, who have already gone through the editing process, who wrote the book and it was a wild success. And I'm like comparing myself to those writers and thinking, oh, I shouldn't even start. Why should I even begin? Right.
Yeah.
And so you were saying the phrase compare despair, because I think everybody feels despairing when they start comparing themselves. So I remember doing EET for that problem, like comparing myself and being able to just let that go and focus. And if ever that comes again, I'm not going to say, dang, like EET didn't work. No, I'm just going to just do my EET again, like on some other worry or some other problem. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you kind of going into your process of how you insert it sort of into your miracle morning practice,
Oh
because
yeah.
that's, I mean, I don't call it miracle morning, but I definitely
Hmm.
have a morning routine that's blocked
Okay.
out in my calendar. And
Okay.
I think it's, what is it? It's like, I have an acronym for it. It's like WPMB, and
Okay.
it's walking, morning pages, like writing stream of consciousness pages, meditation, and then breakfast. And so lately, especially since I recently moved, for those on the
Hmm.
podcast that have heard me before,
Hmm.
so I'm in a transition point, and I've been getting up a bit earlier just with the new environment. It's easier to, and I start every morning by walking. So I used to meditate, but now I just walk. And it's basically movement meditation because I don't listen to anything. I just observe the world, and I'm out
Oh yeah.
walking, and I'm kind of in the city now. So I can kind of observe people and kind of have a
Hmm.
non-attached experience. And what's interesting is I've found that now I do EET twice in the morning. I do it
Wow.
first after a few minutes while I'm walking. So I do it
Okay.
with my eyes open as I'm like receiving the world. So I think there's
Hmm.
a sense of like walking, I used the metaphor of swimming earlier. I think
Hmm.
walking is the same thing. It's just instead of water, it's air, and we
Hmm.
don't perceive it, but it's there. That energy's there. And I do it then. And sometimes, it's like I'm looking behind me just to make sure nobody's too close by in case I'm a little
Hmm.
loud and they're like, what is
Hmm.
he saying? I'm sure nobody would
Yeah.
mind. And then what I do is then after my walk, I come back home and I either have breakfast or I do my writing or both. And then after that, I go into meditation, and that's sitting meditation. And I've started to do visualizations, but that's kind of besides the point because it's really just
Hmm.
visualizations that I use to like assist with my focus during meditation. So it's not like I'm visualizing any particular scene or thing I want to happen. It's more of just a tracking mechanism. And what I do is I split, rather than doing a time limit, I
Hmm.
actually make it more like I'm building something, like I'm building an egg or a cocoon for myself out of my breath, or out of the life energy coming through me. And what I do is halfway through. So for example, this morning I did 10 rounds. So I counted to 10 breaths, and then each one of those 10 breaths is a round. And so I did 10 rounds. Then I said EET. So at the deepest part of my meditation is when I did do the EET. And so it kind of like slows down time a little bit so I can really focus. And then I do 10 more breaths, 10 more rounds of breaths after that. So that's like a 15-minute practice, for example. And
Wow.
I found that that's really great because for whatever reason I just wanted to do it when I'm outside looking at the world. And maybe it's because I want to feel within me that the intention and the opening to healing that I have when I do the EET is accessible to me when I'm walking, looking out at the world, hearing all the sounds, and it's accessible to me when I'm very quiet and I have my eyes closed and the lights off. Because I think it's like both are valuable. Like if I felt like I could only be like positive and conscious and like abundant when I was closing my eyes in meditation, I feel like that would be kind of limiting. Like we need to be able to move around the world. I mean, you know how it
Exactly.
is. Like you have to
Yeah.
bring this into your sessions with your patients. So like, and onto your
Mm.
podcast, and I have the same with my podcast and the work I do. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I really appreciate you sharing about kind of your morning practice because I definitely resonate with that and the importance of that. And I'm curious how you feel when you're talking to patients about, like, do your patients come to you? I mean, of course they come to you with like their issues and their problems,
Hmm.
but do you ever have patients come to you from that place where it's like, when should I do this? Like, when's the best time for me to do this? And how
Mm.
do you work with people to sort of on their energy work spiritual practices and the timing? Because I imagine
Hmm.
it kind of is different for everybody, right?
Yeah, I just tell them just begin with the energy breaths twice a day.
Okay.
So whenever they wake up, if they wake up at 12 noon, just do it when you wake
Right.
up at 12 noon,
Right.
and then do it, before they go to sleep.
Right.
Because even though it's called energy breaths, it's not like a coffee
Right.
energy breaths.
Right.
It's more of a being able to do work kind of energy breaths, like whether the work is going to sleep or whether
Right.
the work is,
Right.
being able to concentrate during the day. Um, I think people do have that choice. When people are working with me, what I find though is that there are two big different kind of groups of patients. The majority of the patients actually do energy work when they're working with me during the session. And then there's another group of patients who do energy work between sessions too. They'll work during the energy, during the session, they'll work with me. And between sessions, they're going to, be doing their energy work or whatever. And the two groups, the ones who do energy work in between sessions, are by far the best outcomes.
Okay.
So they're the ones that end up being kind of miraculously like able to get better.
Yeah.
The ones who kind of wait for me to do the energy work, they still do really well, but the pace isn't quite as quick, I think. And then there are those who just want to do the supplements. And at this point, because supplements have limiting factors when it comes to coming off medications, and the more experience I have as a holistic psychiatrist, the more I understand those limitations, that certain medications you just can't get off of them very easily without the energy work. I, at this point, just tell them it's not going to work. It's not going to be a good fit for me to be working with them just with supplements when I know that their medications require energy work.
Right.
So there's no real time that I tell them to do anything other than to do as much as they can,
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like then because you were saying that it's so much more effective and so much more miraculous when they do it on their own. I can imagine it's a night and day difference. It's the difference between a person clearly assuming that they need you in order to heal versus you are providing them the tools and the support that they can use for themselves to heal themselves. And that, that's a completely different paradigm. And I feel like, once a person is open to that, then their body, their physical body, their subtle body, their soul just is like, oh, you're ready to heal? Great. Let's do it then. That kind of just pours into them like that.
Yeah, that attitude. I'm just always looking for that light in my potential patients' eyes, like they're excited. Just the other day, I had this wonderful session with a lady who really is very just aligned with me when it comes to understanding energy work. She has migraine headaches, and so she wanted me to help her because I had helped her son in the past. And so she wanted me to work with her on helping her with her migraine headaches, which is not my specialty. My specialty is actually helping people get off their psych meds. Yeah. But she's like, no, just work with me. So the other day we were doing some energy work, healing some underlying causes for inflammation and other things like that. And then after we kind of did the visualization, did the intention work, it was a really big one using the infinite intention technique, not just the EET. And I asked her how she felt, and she said she felt as if there was a cold breeze that was like blowing around her, and she felt really cold. And then she also noticed that she was shaking, like her body was shaking during the energy work. And for me, I had my typical, yawning, the tearing eyes, that kind of stuff. But I was thinking that that's a really powerful, like a sign that the energy work is working, because the cold breeze, obviously there was no cold breeze other than whatever she was experiencing on her skin or in her body. And it's really because her inflammation was coming down. And that's why she was feeling cold. And the second thing was the shaking. Now, what I noticed was that some people will have a muscle twitch. And when I do the energy work, they'll have a muscle twitch. And I think it's because as the energy gets unblocked, it's like a dam opens up and all the energies would flow. And suddenly the muscle will be innervated and it would just kind of like twitch. But if she's having like her whole body, like basically shaking, that means there's a lot of twitching going on.
Right, it's just twitching
everywhere.
And it's shaking instead of twitching.
Her whole body was shaking.
Wow.
And I think to me that was a sign that there were a lot of little pathways that were being unblocked because of our intention work, partnering with this idea of this infinitely expansive field of life energy that we can tap into and bring that energy in to help speed up the healing process. So it's really just that speeding up of the healing process.
Right.
And if she was the only patient that's ever happened to, I would say that's just kind of like, I wouldn't know what that meant.
Right.
But there were other patients who had similar reactions. But I think what I with this patient was like, you can't just have that reaction if the patient didn't believe in it and I'm just doing the work. It's not like a
Right.
pill that I can just
Right.
make them take and all of a sudden
Right.
the magic
No.
happens.
No.
It really is. I was kind of directing the thoughts, and she and I were working together, and I was helping her in some way, but she was being completely like open and receptive at the subconscious level to that energy work. And that's why she was able to get so much better. But
Ah.
I was like saying to her, I wish every patient could have that level of openness.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her, so what do you think I could say as a teacher in my sessions to patients that would allow them to have these wonderful effects like you just did? Because I was pretty sure that she's had a big shift in terms of the energy work, something that couldn't have happened with supplements, like
right. No
at
way.
all.
Yeah.
So anyways, she thought about it and she goes, well, she says, they just have to be open. They just have to be open. They can't just like close their heart to this process.
Right.
And I was like, how do I help them to be open? I mean, like, that's the key. Like, how do I help them to be open? Well, I can't help them all to be open just by explaining the quantum physics of things or demonstrating it to them. It is really, I think at the bottom line, it's really a kind of a combination of their life experiences and their reaction to those life experiences and their willingness to be curious and open. That's something that people have to come into the work with, and that's different. And I want to emphasize that's very different from just being desperate to get better.
Right.
Because I used to think that they're the same, that I could pick someone who's desperate to get better because they have so many bad symptoms, and that would make them open. No. It's the openness is different from just needing to get better.
Wow. I have so many thoughts about that.
Okay.
I mean, I would also want to kind of get close to wrapping up because I feel like we've had a great conversation, but I gotta say, in terms of to kind of work backwards, what you mentioned when you asked your patient, like, what can I say? I totally get her response in terms of that, because it's sort of like it's up to the patient, really. And if they're not ready to do it, they're not ready to do it. And the nice thing is they'll get what they need from you regardless. So even if you're not able to like heal them 100% and have them this kind of miraculous experience for them, like this one patient or other patients that you've had, it seems like the patients that you see will still get what they need from you. Even if it's a patient where you see them for a consultation and you decide it's not right for them, that's still them getting what they need from you, because then they'll move on and find something that does work, or they'll go suffer for a while. But sometimes we have to suffer for a while to learn the lessons, But I do love that. And it's so funny. I so appreciate this style of conversation, because
me too.
It's awakening me to things in my own experience. Where, like what you were saying about the Twitch thing, I have been dealing with a Twitch during meditation for like the last couple years that I'm like, why does this happen? And it's so funny. It only happens when I yawn. So what happens is, and it's only when I yawn during meditation. I can't remember so what happens is when I'm doing sitting meditation, I'll yawn periodically. Sometimes I twitch and sometimes I don't. And I would always be like, oh, why am I twitching? That's so wrong. My body shouldn't be doing that. And I realize, and maybe this is actually also something you could say to patients is, even whether they're skeptical or not, say like, as we do this work, your body may do things you're not used to it doing. It may react in ways that you're like, what the heck is that? Allow your body to do what it's going to do. It's good. Like what
Okay.
your body needs to do for itself is good. Because I
Okay.
realize like that's what I just received from you saying, talking about your patient. I like
Okay.
had that insight for myself, and I realized,
Mhm.
oh, this is a good thing. Like, and I do the shaking. Like they call it
Oh,
in some contexts, it's called neurogenic tremors when
okay.
they call it tremors when it's involuntary, when
Okay.
it's like before social situations sometimes, especially as a
Mhm.
kid,
Okay.
my legs would shake and
Okay.
the anxiety would be trying to get out. And
Okay.
now it's like I do it consciously, I'll just
Okay.
shake my body, and as many of
Oh,
us,
okay.
learn to.
Hmm.
But that's so interesting about the twitching and how it's
Hmm.
kind of like mini shakes. Like the shakes are
Hmm.
made up of many twitches all at once.
Yeah.
And once you said the thing about the connection between the yawn and the twitch during energy work, I was like,
Okay.
oh, it's like the light bulb went off. And I hope that for people listening too, if you ever have
Yeah.
weird stuff like that happen to you, know
Yeah.
that it's most likely a good thing. It's most likely the energy's going
Yeah.
through you and you're
Okay.
kind of being spiritually cleansed, if we want to put it that way. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I when I first started doing energy work, I was yawning and was like, "Why am I yawning?" And it would
I'm
only
tired or
happen when I'm
something.
doing energy work. I'm like, I'm trying to reassure the patient, I am not bored by you. This is not me doing it. This is what happens doing energy work.
Yeah.
And then later on, I noticed that the sicker patients, the ones that were really in need of
Mm.
energy, I'm like tearing and I'm yawning like crazy when I'm doing energy
Mm.
work. So I started to almost like observe the yawning and the tearing diagnostically, like,
Right,
okay,
right.
this means
Yeah,
this
yeah.
and this means that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Wow.
funny.
Yeah, I guess
But
after enough times,
yeah,
you have to start doing it that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to keep it kind of shorter
Mhm.
and just let people know that our conversations will continue with other, other podcasts. And I do like this spontaneous kind of like flow of conversation so much better. First of all, it's not quite as difficult for us because we're not kind of held to a certain
Mhm.
structure that we
Mhm.
set beforehand. And second of all, it allows us to kind of really provide kind of an hors d'oeuvre, I guess,
Yeah.
of what's going to be coming up in my book that I'm going to be
Mhm.
writing about that's much more structured and organized and have more interesting stories to share with people. And yeah, this is exactly what I think I would like to move forward with. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well,
Okay.
thank you for having me. It's such a joy to have these conversations with you.
Yeah, it's
I
been
learned so
great.
much. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun too. And we'll have, other podcasts with other experts and different people come up, or podcasts where I'm recording on my own. But this is really, I love being able to have you back and for us to create some podcasts together. So
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I want to thank everybody who's been listening to our podcast up to this point, and really want to share my appreciation for you sticking with this podcast and being able to um, enjoy some of the contents that we are trying to provide. Today, I think the importance of our message is that when you set positive intentions, when you partner with this energy that we think of as kind of this universal, infinite source of positive life energy, that's when the intention work can really take off and you can create a lot of positive shifts in your life, and sometimes create positive shifts in your body too. And that will show up in lots of different signs and signals. So if you like what you heard, please subscribe to this weekly podcast for more amazing information, and give a positive rating to help spread this message. Subscribe to my website, holisticspsychiatrist.com, for some of the holistic updates that will be coming up at times. And in those updates, I share stories and insights from my holistic practice as well. And so I wish you all a great week and that you'll come back for more podcasts. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.